The reality with football right now is that it is a system that's broken. 58% of the top 92 clubs are technically insolvent. And what that means is that if the owner was to get bored and walk away, the club's bust. The interest of the Premier League is shaped by its stakeholders, and its stakeholders are 20 billionaires. What they want is more money, and they wanted to keep it to themselves. The Premier League's broadcast deal, it's 3.2 billion. 88% of that stays in the Premier League. 7% of it goes to the clubs that have got themselves relegated in the last couple of years from the Premier League. That leaves 5%. That 5% is split between the next 138 clubs. Where is the competitive balance? Where is the support of the pyramid? We need an independent regulator. There is a doomsday scenario, and it's not a million miles away, unfortunately.
First and foremost, can you just say your full name and your role within this all?
Niall Couper, Chief Executive of Fair Game. The reality with football right now is that it is a system that's broken. 58% of the top 92 clubs are technically insolvent. And what that means is that if the owner was to get bored and walk away, the club's bust. And the gaps between the divisions has got massively out of control, as we know. I mean, you have to only look at the gap between the Premier League and the Championship, and complete competitive imbalance that's going on there. Equality standards is basically lip service. So there's loads of things that really need to be addressed within the game. It's a bit of a mess. It's about time we got a regulator, grabbed hold of it, and sorted the game out.
Yeah, what exactly would the regulator do from your perspective?
So I think the regulator, for a fair games perspective, gives the opportunity to bring sense to this chaos. Gives an opportunity to come in and look at that financial gap, that financial disparity that exists. That means fans of Grimsby or Newport or Lincoln City or Cambridge or Luton, those sort of clubs can feel comfortable that they will be there for the long haul, that they will be in existence, that their club won't be changed. It won't be like Cardiff City suddenly playing in the Reds or Hull having their name changed overnight. And that fans are for once put at the heart of the decision-making process of what matters for their club. After all, they are the real owners of football, not the people who are temporarily there just for a few years before they make their big bucks or flog their club or whatever. That's the history. That's the history and traditions of the football fans love. That's the big difference that we need. That's why we need a regulator.
How close are we to getting the regulator, and what's changed?
We're at a situation now where we could be looking at a regulator being in place for the start of the new season. That's how close we are. There is a political change slightly. I mean, it was originally a Tory bill and now it's a Labour bill. And we've seen a change in the Tory leadership, which has meant that there are a few more people coming out of the woodwork that are suddenly not so pro a regulator. So, you know, in the House of Lords, there are people that have, let's be honest, got quite a lot of vested interest in how the regulator is shaped, and they're making their say. So, you know, people like Karen Brady, who is the chair of West Ham United, doing a fantastic job about arguing why the Premier League needs to have more money. And you have other people, there's a Man City lawyer, an example in there, who doesn't take a genius to imagine what he's arguing for. At the same time, you're seeing other people standing up and saying, right, what about the rest of football? This isn't a Premier League governance bill. This is a football governance bill. So let's think about the whole of the football system. I think everybody loves the pyramid, loves the magic, loves the small guys having the opportunity to beat the big guys. That kind of community feel. The reason I go to football is because I love sitting in, I'm an AFC Wimbledon fan, so I love sitting there having a pint in my little pub that's in the ground and having like the community atmosphere that you have there. That's what makes football special. I think for all the regular goers of football, that's what they love. And this protects that. And that's where the kind of football political shenanigans really need to come to an end, and we can see this progress, we can see things changing going forward.
375 amendments to the Football Regulator Bill have been proposed in the last few days. What's it been like for you watching on to that, and what do you make of some of those amendments? Because when you look at them, the idea of going from a crest to a badge, like wording like that, it looks to me like filibuster tactics.
There are a number of amendments in there that have been proposed that are actually useful, but there are, I should say, you know, like hundreds and hundreds of amendments that have been put down. Some of them are tiny and some of them are, technically they're just following each other. So they're like repeating, changing the word from to both and best to something else. Some people in the House of Lords who are not pro the bill have got up and said, right, well, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk for ages on it. It's filibustering, right? It's filibustering. The way filibustering works is that a Lord, I've learned so much about all this whole thing in the last few years. Honestly, I've gone from, knowing nothing to basically not only just having 101 in filibustering, I'm at PhD level now. Basically, a law can get up and speak for 10 minutes on any of the amendments. But that doesn't mean just one law, that means every peer. So if you're people that aren't necessarily pro the bill, what you can do is get up and talk for 10 minutes. And when I've been in the gallery, I've looked over and I've seen certain peers passing little notes to each other, going, oh, look, here's a load of stuff you can waffle on about for 10 minutes. Here's a little list of bullet points. And they've gone and waffled on, and you're looking at the clock. There's a clock on the wall, and it's going to like 9 minutes 59 or whatever. And they sit down and go, like, they've timed that brilliantly. And other people are patting them on the back and well done for waffling for 10 minutes. And it's just like, we're talking about changing our national game, and they're playing like schoolboy politics with it. It's just unbelievably daft. The restraint that you've got of football fans not shouting, you don't know what you're doing, and all this, and wanting to throw things over, which we're not allowed to do, by the way. You're not allowed to do any of that in that. But the temptation was massively there because it was just so frustrating. And there are other people going, I don't know how you can do it. And maybe I'm just torturing myself, but I'm doing it for everybody else. I'm doing it for the wider game, wider sake of football, to see our political system trying to create something that works for all football fans. It's frustrating when you've got other people who, frankly, don't know much about football waffling on for the sake of trying to kill something that is so fundamental to supporters of clubs all the way down the pyramid.
One of the main things that's been discussed is a sunset clause. Can you explain why people want, why certain members of the House of Lords want a sunset clause and the potential dangers of having one there?
So the sunset clause has been proposed, and for some people it might seem relatively sensible that, like, after 5 years the regulator no longer needs to exist, so you've got the opportunity to kill it. Sounds relatively sensible. Now, just imagine if you're somebody who is actually the reason why the regulator's in place, so you're a rogue owner, or you're people that are like don't want to see anything under the bonnet of how financially messed up your club is, or you might have disagreements with your fans. All of those will just be going, well, if I just delay this and talk this out, then what's the point? I can pay complete lip service to the regulator. It's going to be gone in 5 years. Why even bother? So the idea of a sunset clause ultimately, immediately pulls the rug underneath the authority and the power of the regulator straight away. So it's like, have that, and then basically, well, what's the point of the regulator? That is just undermining it from day one, and it's clearly a tactic from those who don't like the idea of seeing how badly run football is, or how badly run their club is, or how disconnected they are with the fans. It's stupid. It's a ridiculous idea. It deserves no credence and should just be thrown in the bin along with some of the other rogue owners that we are aware of in football.
Do you have any sympathy at all with what they're saying? Because I know there's a very different opinion on how the regulator will end up impacting football. There's concern that it could lock off the top division. How do you see it in terms of their arguments against a regulator? When
you listen to some of the arguments and remember, the Premier League is very good at looking after the interests of the Premier League. Fantastic at it. But the interest of the Premier League is shaped by its stakeholders, and its stakeholders are 20 billionaires. What they want is more money, and they want to keep it to themselves. So their argument that they need to keep their money, of course they do, and whether they're worried about how they are competitively against their European neighbours, they'll talk about, they're worried about the gap. At the moment, the Premier League's broadcast deal is 2.5 to 3 times bigger than the next league. Now, that's massive. I think that anybody with half a brain would look at it and go, right, actually, you create a stronger system when you look at how the rest of the game is and how helping sort of support that. It's 3.2 billion a year. 88% of that stays in the Premier League. Of the other 12%, 7% of it goes to the clubs that have got themselves relegated in the last couple of years from the Premier League. That leaves 5%. That 5% is split between the next 138 clubs. Where is the competitive balance? Where is the support of the pyramid? The Premier League are arguing that actually that's not particularly, that's fine, that system or whatever. If you give more money lower down the pyramid, what you do is you create stronger academies, better stadiums, so more people going to watch football. You create things like women's teams, community programs, proper staffing at other football clubs lower down the pyramid. All of that, better academies, what does that lead to? Better English players, better talent, better game, more influence globally. More people going to grounds, seeing their football club as a hub. You get more people falling in love with the game. These are all things that benefit not just the sustainability of those little clubs, but the sustainability of the whole of the football pyramid. It's very naive and short-sighted from the Premier League to saying, well, we just keep all that money at the top, because actually the strength of English football is the whole pyramid. You know, lots of people go, well, I might be an Arsenal fan or I might be a Spurs fan, but actually you're going to watch Barnet, QPR or Salford City or Lincoln City or whatever. All these other clubs, fine, have your brand club, but your community club, that's the bit that strengthens, and that's the bit, let's invest in that, because that is the future of the game. That's what builds the strength of the game.
You mentioned there, you're going up against billionaires, state-owned clubs, people like Karen Brady, who, as you say, have invested interests in keeping money in the Premier League. Can you kind of explain how big of a challenge that is to get a regulator through? I mean, ultimately, who has the power in this situation? Do they honestly just not care about the football pyramid? At the very top, does the Premier League not care about the rest of the football pyramid? Because you see it with FA Cup replays being scrapped. Do you think that just is all part of the package of the Premier League ultimately is not that bothered or invested in the rest of the English football pyramids at all?
So when you look at the football pyramid and whether the Premier League cares about it or not, two really good examples I have of here of people who've been chairman or CEOs who've been on the Premier League over the last 5-10 years. Their agenda never talks about the rest of the football pyramid, never talks about the EFL or the National League. God, that must be a million miles away, right? Never really on the agenda, because it's about 20 billionaires getting more money. And the other example literally comes from last night in the Football Governance Bill debate. And it was great just watching the faces of some of the peers who are obviously very pro-Premier League, when one of the peers, not a Labour peer actually, a crossbencher, got up and said, is football all about just the 20 clubs? Or is it about anything more than that? If it's just about the 20 clubs, and that's what it looks like, why have you got into that situation where you're not caring about everybody else? Do those 20 clubs actually care? That was the question that was asked. The arguments that have been put forward just seems, no, they don't. And that's really sad. Going along to watch a lower league game or a championship game, and even that kind of spirit and that kind of thing is really amazing. And there'll be Premier League fans who will feel the same way. You know, that community asset. The reality is that those owners don't really necessarily care. I remember one other quote from a chairman was, football's a really easy game to run and make money from if it wasn't for the fans. That just says a lot. Fair game. We're there for the smaller clubs. We're there for the pyramid. We're there for the fans. That's what we're trying to do, and that's what I think the Football Governance Bill needs to do, because that's what strengthens the whole game. That's what makes it so special. And that only comes through if you start thinking about the whole of football, not just your 20 billionaires. I was really happy to have with me loads of other clubs and loads of other supporters, and there was some stakeholders, level playing field, women in football were all in Parliament yesterday. The sense of frustration you get when you just see these people who are just talking for the sake of talking, trying to delay something that actually could make a real big difference. I really struggle to understand their motivation. We need an independent regulator. We need something that holds the game to account and makes it fairer and better and stronger. It's right there. It's tangible. It's so close. We need people not to waste our time, and there are people in the House of Lords that seem to be very adamant on wasting our time.
Final question, really. What is the best case scenario of everything that's happened, and what's the worst case scenario in terms of the regulator, a time frame of the regulator coming in?
The best case scenario for a football regulator is that we have it in place for the start of the new season, and that it has the ability to look at the financial distribution within the game, so it can close those gaps. It can make it a situation where clubs aren't routinely overspending on players' wages compared to revenue, where you have proper investment, where the community is all strengthened again. The worst case scenario is there is no regulator, and the idea of the European Super League resurfaces. And I've heard rumours of a World Super League where you have a club that might play as, say, the City Blues, and they have a couple of games in Manchester, a couple of games in Chicago, a couple of games in Beijing, and they play against Real, and Real might have a couple of games in Madrid, a few games in Rio, a couple of games in, I don't know, Kuala Lumpur. Harlem Globetrotters' idea of football. At no point does the fan really matter. It's just showcasing talent. That goes so far removed away from the kind of football pyramid that not just exists in this country, but in so many other countries. And that's, I think, a realistic possibility if we don't have a strong, independent football regulator in this country. We're at a precipice in terms of whether the regulator ends up being in the way that Fair Game believes it should. And we will know in the next few weeks about what direction it takes. I think for any footy fan watching and listening, this is a moment to reach out to your parliamentarians, your politicians, your MPs, and say, look, I want a better direction for football. I want a place where those financial gaps aren't so massive that makes it football clubs so unsustainable. And you see clubs gambling to try and reach up to levels that are just unattainable. You know, we need to kill it. We need to kill that idea. Let's have a football regulator in. Let's have one that actually makes a difference and serves the whole of the game, serves the fans, serves the pyramid. That's why we really need our politicians not to buckle, because there is a doomsday scenario and it's not a million miles away, unfortunately.